All right. Here we are. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Welcome to another Wednesday. What's up, DJ Sucker Tash and Mr. Pat McAbery? Uh, I love how people come to the live stream and they give me a heads up right away that they're working out or doing a chore or something like that. And I appreciate that. It's the way this channel is. We're transparent and we do this and that's the way it works. So it's been a little bit of time here. Let me move the Blockbuster cup out of the way. But I have been deep into learning mode and I'm kind of starting to be ready to talk about some of this stuff related to Gen AI and start to have conversations with you, whoever is here, uh, about what this is and where I see it going and how it sort of fits into what we do, or at least will sometimes potentially fit into what we do as content creators, storytellers, filmmakers, whatever label you want to put onto what it is that you do to create content. Um, doesn't really matter to me. But what does matter is that collectively, whomever is coming to this channel is watching the content that I'm creating, especially related to this subject, generative AI, that we're figuring it out together and we're figuring out how it works out for potentially the work that we are creating, either for ourselves or more than likely for our clients. So there's a lot going on here. And, Gen AI or generative AI is not something at this point that's brand new. Um, if you've been along for the ride, not on this channel, but just in terms of Gen AI, even if you're just in the stands, you're in the audience, you're watching what's happening, you're a viewer. Since Mid Journey dropped and then some of these other models and solutions came out on the market, we've seen a pretty rapid sort of change in terms of how these tools are being used, what they can actually generate and create. And there's still, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, lots of issues and there's a lot of learning to be had. But if you kind of take a look at, and please, I'd love it if you're in the chat and you're making comments and things like that. And thanks, DJ, for letting me know I'm seen and I'm loud and I'm clear. If if you look at this whole space here, I just lost my just a slight train of thought there, but if you look at this whole space here, it's moving at light speed. And so what we need to do is figure out how to learn these tools. Thought that was lost is back. Think back to, and I'm not saying you remember this depending on your age, but think back to when applications like Photoshop, Quark Express, that's a stretch maybe. Um, Original versions of Premiere, Final Cut Pro, whatever it is, right? You think about all of these things that we use. I mean, heck, just put Microsoft Word into that category of applications. And the longer you wait to dive into learning a particular app or solution, the harder it will be for you to learn what that application is. Yeah, it's a pacemaker. Don't even ask about this, David. This is a knockoff Bluetooth headset, and the problem that I'm having, I'm going to divert for a second, is that my AirPod Pros, um, they have this thing where they're trying to connect to something inside of this particular space. So yeah, ear pierced by aspirin. I was waiting for somebody to say something about that. Um, they just connect all the time, and I hate this thing, but it consistently will connect properly. Who knows what's happening to my head? I might have a little hand growing out of my ear or something in the future. Um, yeah, but there you go. All right. So what I'm trying to say here is that starting to dip your toes into Gen AI, if you haven't already, and you are somebody who creates content, it's probably a better idea to get into this game now than later to figure out A, if it's something that you want to do at all. And B, if you want to learn, you can learn based on where things are now, as opposed to diving into what Runway or VO3 or Kling or, Sora, which we haven't heard a lot from lately, but I'm sure we will in the near future. Um, and all of these solutions are going to be giving us already, it's messy. And what I mean by that is, if I take a look at Runway's user interface, it's clunky. You think it's put together in a way that makes sense for the end user. It's really not. Um, LTX Studio, that's one that I've been using. There's parts of it that I really like and other things I don't. Also pretty clunky. And a lot of the clunkiness comes from asset management or lack thereof. Um, PageMaker. Oh, I see. We went from pacemaker ear to pagemaker for David. Pagemaker was one, and um, I have a long history with graphic design firms, and when I came into the industry in the mid '90s, it was really sort of the time that desktop publishing was going to take over all of graphic design. And it was a big change. And at the same time, we had Quadras and, Quark Express and Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop and these applications being used together. And it was tumultuous. And then we, of course, had the same thing with NLEs and mini DV. And look, this is nothing new. What's new right now is how fast it's happening. And it's a little bit harder right now to figure out how this plays out than it did before. You used to have years, maybe a decade plus, for everything to sort of play out. It wasn't in real time or faster than real time, so it was a little bit easier for us to kind of sort it out over time. And right now, for a number of reasons in the last 5 years, things have happened in the world and things have happened to our industry that have been things that we didn't necessarily see coming. And then if you add onto it, forget AI as a whole topic, but if you just want to take generative AI and you put that into the bucket as well, it creates a lot of uncertainty and a lot of where is this going? And look, I'm going to name some of the things that I've been digging into over the last month and a half. Runway, Pixverse, you've got um, Google and they're over a lot of things VO, but they have this Flow platform which does a lot of stuff. LTX Studio, Midjourney, Runway ML, Luma AI, that's their dream machine. Pixverse, EasyVid AI, Kling AI, Weavy AI, very interesting by the way. I might talk about that today. Electric Sheep, Moon Valley, who is really coming into the market with what is being touted as ethical Gen AI, and they're trying to get studios on board because of where their information, where their data is coming from. Sea Dance, music stuff. You've got Suno and all this other stuff. Still got Dolly out there. Um, 11 Labs for audio things. It's just kind of getting crazy in terms of how much is available to us in terms of this particular part of the market, Gen AI. And and then it goes a lot deeper than that, because it's sort of about figuring out what the best workflow is for you, for projects. How useful is it? Are you going to be able to generate and create things that are really client usable when you're using these tools? And I think the answer overall to that stuff is yes. But there's still a lot of work. And I don't think at this point in time, I'm not sure if at any point in time, though maybe it's a company like Adobe with Firefly that's going to be able to do it. Um, if we're ever going to get to a place where you can go to one platform, one solution, and actually generate everything that you need there. Um, Let me know if you're hearing any like rustling and things like that. My son has a project that he's doing right now outside of the barn, where I have all of these blackberry bushes, and those are a very invasive type of plant. And so he's clearing them off. He was supposed to do it about 2, 3 hours ago, and he didn't. And this is a culinary catastrophe. If you are wondering about my finger, don't worry about it. So let's kind of get the chat going a little bit. I'm going to talk about some things. I'm going to show you some things that I've been generating. I'll talk about some of the things that I like in terms of what I've been able to do. And then I'm going to talk about things that are struggles, or the things that you should be thinking about if you dive into this. But at this point in time, be prepared to get into and subscribe to more than one platform or solution when it comes to Gen AI. When I first wanted to dive into this um, head first, I thought, you know what? I'll go ahead and subscribe to 3, 4, 5 of these. I'll do an annual subscription, because I can save, tends to be about 20% on those subscriptions for each one of these. And then I realized that was really daft to go about it that way, because once you start getting into these tools and you start to use them, you'll pretty quickly figure out whether or not they think like you do, quote unquote, if they have a workflow that kind of thinks like you do and can be useful to what it is that you're generating in terms of content. So I think the best way to go about this is to go into this in a monthly kind of basis right now. When I originally subscribed, what I did is I did a month of Runway ML, I did a month of Luma Labs Dream Machine, I did a month of LTX Studio, um, and then I dropped 2 of those. I dropped Luma Labs Dream Machine after a month. I dropped LTX Studio after a month, though I may actually sign up for that again. And that way, you're just committing to a period of time whereby you have, you know, not committed and money for a certain thing that Brandon, that's so awesome. What a great post. I love it. I thought you meant something sound wise in my space. Congratulations. Love to hear and see comments like that. So that's pretty awesome. So so go into this to begin with the idea. I think my recommendation is to go into this stuff with a like a monthly subscription viewpoint, right? So, like for instance, over here, um, I have Runway, and you'll look in the top right, and you'll see that I have a certain number of credits, and that's for this particular month, and that kind of sucks, but that's just another thing that we need to talk about is the credits part of this. And most of these platforms and solutions are giving you a certain number of credits that you can use. And the big thing is that most of them don't roll over to the next month, though there are some solutions that let you do that. Good. So Mike is getting into this. We can start to have some conversations about stuff and what those are. Micah says, one question that I think needs to be addressed is who actually owns the asset that is created. Thinking forward, if a company hires me to create something using these tools, who owns the result? Um, that's a huge topic to start to talk about. And I think, again, what I want to say, Micah, is that I don't have a succinct, clear answer for you because things are changing so quickly. But I'm going to give you some viewpoints in terms of how I'm diving into this right now, which will change over time. So, number one, um, I think it's extremely difficult to figure out where it's not that these platforms Runway, Sora, VO3, whatever they are not giving you a commercial license that you can use when you're producing content for your clients. The problem is, where was that data scraped from, right? So scraping is exactly what it sounds like. You're scraping information from somewhere, data from somewhere. Um, and where that stuff is scraped from, again, let me know if you're hearing that stuff because he shouldn't be ripping those those blackberry bushes apart right now when I'm doing the live stream. But if it's not bothering you and you guys don't hear it, hopefully noise assist on my mix pre is working. So it it's commercial license. You'll see most of these platforms will give you a commercial license, but first is like, where are they scraping information? There's no doubt in my mind that Alphabet, aka Google, aka VO, Flow, whatever it is, they're scraping from YouTube and from places that from from everywhere potentially. Whereas Moon Valley, which is a very specific Gen AI video based solution, is what they're calling, I think, ethically sourced. So they can show you the paper trail in theory of where that data is scraped from. Thanks, David. Hopefully you hear me, but you just don't hear the stuff from outside. So that's number one. Then once it's scraped, then there's the data mining part of it, which is we'll call it the organizational part, where things are put into buckets and organized and things like that. And I'm sure they're using AI to do that as well. But essentially, you then have the basis to generate images and video from that. And what's interesting is you'll find that as you start to use different models, and you can subscribe to a particular company and their platform, their solution, usually web based, almost always. So you're in a browser, and and you can subscribe to them, and they only use their model to generate images, to generate video, right? Um, but then there are other platforms. LTX Studio is a good example of one, whereby you can go in and say you're going to generate an image or you're going to generate a video, and you get to choose which model you're going to actually use for that. Now, based on what model you're using, um, let's say VO3, which is obviously Google's, you may not subscribe to VO3 through Google. You might be actually accessing that generative AI video model through something like LTX Studio. But it's going to be a lot more expensive to generate video using the VO3 model than it is to use, let's say, Kling's model or somebody else's model. Um, a part of that is because VO3 is doing certain things that other models aren't, very specifically when it comes to audio. So, and then, there's a whole thing having to do with prompting and, you know, and just sort of using image references or multiple image references. So it's moving very, very quickly. So I know I can't answer that question for you completely right now, Micah. What my viewpoint is right now is to go down the rabbit hole, go down deep, and to just start figuring stuff out and how it works and figure out what tools and solutions are working well. And then the legalities of this, if you if you're too precious about it right now, then you're going to stop yourself from learning what this is, right? Um, I don't know what analogy I can give you. It's not about breaking the law or doing something you shouldn't be doing, but if you don't get in early and figure it out, then it's sort of a moot point because that's going to sort itself out, I think. It has to sort itself out, I think, based on each one of these companies wanting to be the platform or the solution for people to generate this content. So, um, I think you sort of have to separate. And what I'm doing personally is I'm taking number one, the overall umbrella of AI, and I'm saying, no, that's not what we're talking about here. That's not what this channel is about. It's not that it's not having impact. It's not that it's not changing everything. It's too broad of a topic to talk about AI as a whole. Um, so then I can sort of be a little bit more tunnel vision about it and say that what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on generative AI. So generating images and video. And how do I combine what I know and what I do in traditional production and combine that with generative AI when it makes sense? When do I only use generative AI when it makes sense to produce works for my clients? So that's the second thing. And then I think you have to know that it's going to evolve very, very quickly, and you just have to go in and, like you said, Micah, keep learning, experimenting, and dig deep, and you'll start to figure out how this is going to work or not for what it is that you're going to produce and create. So it's it's a big topic, but it is a now topic as opposed to, okay, let's wait another year or so. I feel like you might have tried Chat GPT already, Pat, and you might not have known it because it's just becoming sort of like part of the fabric of operating systems and things like that. But it's, right now, I think it's really important to understand that a year or two ago, maybe it was sort of, let's be a viewer, we'll be in the audience, we'll be, somebody who's buying a ticket to this show and we'll watch what's being created. But if you are actively creating content, um, I think it's a good time to start to more than dip your toes into what's going on, because I held back for a very long time. I mean, I jumped into Midjourney pretty early on and went on to Discord and started generating things and just started to, try to get a feel for what this stuff was. And it was like magic. You put a prompt in and magically things start to show up on your screen and you can download them and use them in theory. Again, the legalities of these things are a different discussion. Um, but we're now at a point where what you can produce with these tools are very oftentimes things that can be used. And I can almost guarantee you that we're going to see a huge jump in terms of commercials, advertisements, not only online but on television, that are going to be Gen AI created. And remember this, um, exactly, David. Um, Remember that these are just tools, and I want to not do this and say this just to make you feel better. But after spending, 6 8 weeks, whatever it is, of kind of diving into this stuff pretty consistently, and I am just scratching the surface. What I can tell you is this: if you take the overall subject of AI away from this conversation and you just focus on generative AI, there are a lot of things that have to get worked out in terms of the legal parts of this and who owns what, if you ever are going to know that. And I'm more concerned at this point in terms of who owns what I'm uploading and and using, meaning as the basis for my content. And that's the other thing that is very different. Like if you look at the terms of service when you are uploading to something like TikTok or you're using their editing solution CapCut, um, they can do pretty much whatever they want with that. And don't even get me started on Meta. I mean, that's a whole other conversation for, for a US based company and how they're using our data and how hard it is to go through submenus to turn certain things off, like in Instagram now, sort of automatically sharing your location and things like that. There's so many parts to this, but the reality is that um, whether you think I'm saying it to make you feel better or not, I feel strongly now that I've been using these tools that it's still going to come down to storytelling. It's still going to come down to what's coming out of your head, right? Um, and it really isn't easy right now. And maybe it will get easier. It might get harder. Uh, but the reality is that it's just these are just tools and they are fantastical once you start to dive into them in terms of what they can create. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty of it, it's not going to be easy for things. We're working things out like continuity in terms of consistency of character and environment and things like that. And a lot of the problems we saw even 6 to 12 months ago are starting to go away. But it's still hard work to take what's inside of your head and to translate that into something that is consistent to tell a story or to realize a script that's been written or whatever your approach is. Mike says, I'm excited to about the idea of seeing the pictures that are in my head as a tool to help communicate more clearly to the production team, animatics and previs and all that stuff. Yeah. Um, what's up, Jeff? It's been a while. Yes, I hope Cameron Flask will be coming back soon. Maybe it's on the summer vacation. I need to connect with Ben and Caleb about that. It's something I'd like to ramp up again in the fall. I love doing it. I think those guys love doing it. And if we can, get that back onto the schedule once a month, that would be great. Pat says, I totally agree with the idea that it's just a new tool. People will become specialists in making good AI. Yes. And I think combining generative AI with actual production is also going to be an issue. Let me talk about one more thing. Because this is not the only time I'm going to be talking about Gen AI. I think this is not necessarily going to be the theme for all of the content on the channel, but there's going to be a thread here that's going to exist for a while when I am doing live streams and hopefully some recorded content in the very near future as well, whereby this is a big part of the conversation because I think it's very relevant right now. And I'm happy to talk about traditional production things as well. Um, but I think, I really think that one of the things that we should all be thinking about when it comes to this topic as a whole, um, besides the ethical issues and it's just a tool and stuff like that, is that generative AI is, I believe, pretty strongly now, the more that I'm seeing what's going on, is going to leapfrog a lot of the things that we have been seeing that are going to seemingly change production in the future. And I think one great example of that is virtual production. Because if you think about virtual production, and everybody who's here, all 10 of you right now, um, if you think about that as a whole, as a subject, it requires a lot of investment in terms of equipment, in terms of talent, in terms of pre production and planning that doesn't necessarily always serve the artist or the artists that are creating something. The fact that you, in a volume based situation with an LED wall, have to decide in most situations what's going to be behind talent, and not only lighting them, but that is the environment with actors and things like that, whether they're real or they're computer generated. That's a big ask when you're talking about production, because oftentimes, if you think about, production versus post production, a lot of people have the mentality that 50% of it's created in production, 50% of it's created in post. The way creative people think isn't necessarily always about it has to be created before production happens. And people are getting around some of that by doing things like shooting on green screen, but then integrating more traditional virtual production components like Unreal Engine, some image based lighting, some other things like that, and then replacing that background. There are other things happening on the high end in the market for virtual production where things like um, subframes are being captured by the camera and are being produced by rear or front projection where you don't have an LED wall. So, for instance, you've got a red camera and you've got a rear or front projection screen, and what you are projecting onto the screen is an approximation of the environment that the character or characters are going to be in at that time. So just imagine that behind me is a beautiful desert island scene or a beautiful beach scene, or I'm in the middle of Times Square. So we have a sense based on the script and what's being created of what the environment is. That's helping light the talent. There's no green, so the talent's not getting what we call green fatigue, which can be a bit much when you're in a space all day long and you're surrounded by, or there's a lot of green in the space. And you're also not introducing all of those problems in post. But what's happening is the projector and the camera are capturing essentially at the same time a second frame, and that frame has green. So when you get into post, you're getting the advantages of image-based lighting or environmental lighting being wrapped around the talent. You can still have image-based lighting happening to approximate, things that would be happening in that space. But because you now have a more traditional green screen workflow in terms of the footage that you have, you can now replace that background that was being used as a quote unquote placeholder, but doing some other things with the actual background and environment that you want to use with background actors and players and all the extras and whatever else it is, right? You're in the Coliseum, and when you shoot it, it's just basically the Coliseum was, with sort of that same color tone and things like that, and then that gets replaced. Well, I think that generative AI, and I'm taking a little while to get to this, is going to leapfrog that, because if we already see what's happening with the left from Runway and some of these other solutions, I can shoot something in a relatively complex environment right now, and I can go in using Gen AI tools and I can completely remove that environment. It has depth depth map information. It has luminance information. It has all of these things. So those scenes can be, to a degree, maybe more than to a degree, relit. You can change the environment that the person's in. And if you've been following along with Gen AI recently, you've seen crazy things like a woman walking around down steps and things like that with AirPods. And basic, not AirPods, with just regular earphones, plugged in, and walking around, and then all of a sudden the environment changes to, the 18th century or 19th century Victorian times, and the person's walking through the streets of something that was seemingly 150 years ago, but still in their plain clothes with, listening to music, and then that can be changed in terms of what the person's wearing. And I think we're going to leapfrog here. So if you've ever heard of a company called VU, with an accent over the U, they have been in the virtual production game for a long time. They are creating solutions now whereby you are not going to be tied to the brain bar of having all of those people and software solutions to put everything together. They're simplifying the process, and they're also starting to use generative AI to create environments and things like that. Doesn't mean Unreal Engine isn't part of that if people want it to be, but that's the idea, is if this is going to get, and it will be, adopted on a larger scale, it has to be something that can be a little bit easier than it is right now. So lots of stuff going on. What I'd love to hear are questions that you have about Gen AI. Questions that I may or may not be able to answer today, but I want to see what those questions are, the things that you are thinking about, the things that you were trying to sort out, because I think that that's really important for us to discuss. Um, just in terms of solutions, I said that I've been using Runway. I've been using LTX Studio. There's another solution called Weavy that I want to talk about a little bit, probably today. Hedra, I'll talk about how I'm using that tool, which is my newest uh, generative AI subscription. And I'll tell you why I'm using that, and I'll start to get into that. David says I shot a large green screen shoot for Friday Night Frights and asked for what the background would be for the witches flying, but never got it. I just guessed the lighting. AI might help. It might. The other problem that we have right now with generative AI is it's somewhat, and when I say somewhat, I mean it's very limited in terms of how long, for the most part, your AI generations can be once you start to get into video. They can get very expensive, and generally, the highest resolution that we are natively creating things in is 1080p. A lot of these solutions are 540 and 720p in terms of the baseline. And then you are in a situation whereby, depending on the solution you're using, you have to upres, either with their solution or with something external like Topaz. Um, so, what tools do I think will have the best return on investment in the short term? I don't know if I have a complete answer to that right now. I think that it's going to be combinations of. A lot of people like to generate their images in something like Midjourney and then move the images over to, something else to do the generative video component of it. I think you're going to wind up being in 3 or 4 solutions right now. At the moment, I'm seeing rapid development from Runway ML. So I think that solution is going to be one that I'm going to keep for a while. I have inherent issues with Runway from a user interface standpoint. I think that the organizational component of Runway and a lot of these solutions is very non-intuitive for us, the end user. It's not very easy as you start to generate these assets, which there are many, and I can't even tell you how many are being generated because you're just going through the process. And being able to name and organize and keep those things together has a long way to go. And I say that with real experience, from the standpoint that I can see the difference of where it is making sense and where it's not. But Runway has different ways that you can generate things. You can go to your dashboard and you can, create sessions and things like that, to generate video, to generate images, all of that fun stuff. But then you can do it in a way that is sort of uploading assets, and then starting from there, or you can prompt based on assets that you're adding. And then as you start to get into here, you'll start to see that it might be using multiple models. It might be using one model. You can add just one piece of media. But then if you start to get into tool mode, it's a little bit different where you can upload multiple assets and then you can combine them together. That's a trend that we're starting to see. The problem is that all of these tools work differently in different platforms, and and organizationally, it just becomes a huge mess, because you're bouncing between them. So that does become very difficult. We'll talk about Weavy in a second, and that might help alleviate some of those problems. But what Runway does really well is it allows you to bring assets in and actually tag them. So when you are trying to tell Runway what to do with 2 or 3 different characters that you have uploaded as references or as the the talent that's going to be in your stuff. You can say, that's Bob and that's Mary and that's Jim, and then you can say, make Jim do this, have Mary do that, have Bob do that, and you are being much more specific about what is in the frame. uh, and then if you upload an environment or a background, or you create one and use that as the basis, you can also prompt and give information about how to handle that. So it's great organizationally from that standpoint. It's really horrible from all of the other assets that are just continuously generated. And I just wish that these tools and these platforms gave us a little bit more in terms of saying, okay, I'm going to start a new project. Let me create a folder hierarchy in terms of everything that I'm creating. Let me go to a place. And some of them do it better than that. What's the approximate total cost per month of the tools I'm using? Well, I'm only using three. I was using three before. I'm spending about $100 a month right now to figure this out. Um, but that's limited to the amount of credits that I'm being given from each of these platforms. So you'll find that with some of them, especially if you're doing primarily image generation, those credits could go a very long way. If you are using certain models like VO3 from Google, that is by far the most expensive one. You could be spending hundreds of credits per second of video that you're generating, as opposed to 2, 3, 5, 10 credits to do images, or even some of the other models being 10 to 30 credits to create a second's worth of video. But rarely do you get out of these models and these tools exactly what you want out of your first prompt or multiple prompts. And that's, I'm just being very candid about this. It's difficult to, and frustrating at times, to work with these tools. But what you can generate with them is pretty amazing. All right, let me jump into talking about some assets that I've been creating and sort of the basis of that. And everything I'm going to show you was basically created, and I can't honestly remember at times exactly where I generated all of these assets. But it's combinations of mostly LTX Studio, which allows you to access and tap into many models from different people, and Runway ML. And then there's Hedra, which I use for audio, which I'll talk about. And then some of it is from Luma AI, from their Dream Machine platform. I dropped that one. I just didn't feel like it was giving me what I wanted, so I spent my $30, and there you go. So let's jump into some stuff here. So the marching orders here were to, and wait, I'm going to come back to me here for a second. This is not a finished product. This is a test, and I had I have a client who gave me a 2-page script, and I've generated some stuff from that for us to have a further conversation of, are we going down the right road here for creating and generating this stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. So you're going to hear my voiceover on a lot of this stuff. I'll come back to me if I need to just sort of explain something a little bit more. But effectively, what I did is I jumped into Luma AI's Dream Machine, LTX Studio, and Runway. And the first thing you want to do is, if it's a client-based project, is have some sort of script or some sort of outline of what it is that you're creating, and go in there and make sure that there's enough information in that script. Like LTX Studio allows you to upload a script. Some of these allow you to do that, and it'll create a storyboard. I find it clunky. I find it hard to work with that. And I don't really love the results that I'm getting. I'm just looking over at my screen here. So if I go into LTX Studio over here, you can see that there's a new storyboard option, and you can go in here and you can either develop a concept by inputting information, or you can stick to the script and you can basically upload text from a script and you can use that as the basis of what you're doing. And then you go in and you have settings and cast and then a breakdown, and you can take each one of those boards, um, and you can effectively, um, it'll generate the images that it thinks you need, and then you can start to cast characters, and the results you get sometimes are very close to what you want, sometimes they're completely different than what you want, and then you can move those images into a video based platform. But I find that it's sort of half baked. It's just not giving me, and I don't think it'll give you, unless all you're trying to do is create a storyboard. I don't think it's going to give you a start to finish solution when it comes to realizing and taking a script to a completed exported um, project. So so what I did is I started jumping into some of these tools, and I started to generate the characters. We've got a pirate captain. Um, we've got a pirate sidekick, and then the theme, without getting into the whole project, is teaching about a particular subject, in this case learning about money and coins and things like that. So let's just jump into this and keep the chat lively. Let's keep talking about this. I can't promise that the audio is going to play when I get to the video, so you're going to have to tell me. But so this and this were sort of my first attempts at, this was really the first one at the pirate captain, and then this was sort of the second one, and these were generated in two different models. I'm pretty sure that I created this one in LTX Studio originally, and it lets you tap into and use different models, but I use the default one that it uses. And then this one, I'm pretty sure it was the one thing that I created in Luma AI's Dream Machine that I started to get a pretty good effect. And what I did here for this captain is I prompted a pirate captain, approximately early 20s, tall, happy, and has an eye patch with some little coins. That was the interpretation of that. And to create that in a Don Bluth style, if you know who Don Bluth is. And, I have talk about 80s here, but Don Bluth was an animator with Disney forever and ever, and then broke off and started to didn't like the way things were going. I think it was in sort of the late 70s with Disney, so broke off and started his own studio, and from that became a lot of animated films were created in that time period in the 80s. Those were not the golden years for Disney animation, but also became the basis for some really interesting laser disc based games like Space Ace, um, and Dragon Slayer, and some other stuff. So that's what I prompted, and so I got this, and I was like, okay, this could be a direction that I would like. Not necessarily the whole environment that the person was in. And then I kind of liked what I was getting from the prompts for the actual environment here. So I felt like this desert island beach with some pirate ships in the background, with some chests, with some money, kind of was doing what I wanted it to do. So that was kind of the start, right? You start generating images that start to be the things, and that you can use to sort of build what your story is. Um, then I wanted to create a second character, which was a character which I believe this character was created in LTX Studio. And this is the sidekick, the pirate sidekick. And so this is sort of where I wound up after a long time in terms of what that character would be. And then I also used that tool to create a 2D version of that. So this is a two-dimensional version of this three-dimensional character, um, just in case that's the direction that the client wanted to go. And then taking that same character and then starting to play around with different environments, right? So there's your your pirate sidekick, and then that's the same character. You're basically loading that reference image in this one here, and then prompting it to get different results in terms of the environment and things like that. So those are essentially my two characters. You've got the pirate sidekick, and then you've got the pirate captain, and those are sort of where I'm headed in terms of that. And then the location itself, the environment, and having a clean version of that as a reference point, I think is very important when you are creating these things. Again, on the chat, if you have questions or you want to make comments, just dive in a little bit, and that would be great for conversation. And then the coins. This proved to be pretty difficult. I started to get to a place where the coins were, and in this case, US pennies, 1 cent pieces, US nickels, 5 cent pieces, started to generate a little bit more realistically in terms of the way they look. Not perfect overall, but you're starting to see some of that variation there, but definitely some hallucinations. And hallucinations are in Gen AI where things are starting to happen or pop up on screen or are created that are not what you would want and just are not realistic. If I had prompted, let's go back here. Sorry, I have to get back to where I was. If I had prompted that I wanted to have somebody with 6 fingers, then that would be different, But we're not getting into, uh, you know, we're not getting into the Princess Bride and stuff like that. No, the beach is not made of cheese, and there's more detail, and I'm still going into tweaking that a little bit. But that's pretty funny that you say that. And these are the things that you run into. The problem is that you run into issues where you're not getting the exact result that you want. So what you would do is you take that beach location and you'd start to regenerate that and regenerate it again, where you started to specify color more. You want it to look more like sand. You don't want it to look like cheese that you would put onto a Philly cheesesteak steak, and stuff like that. But despite that, you can get some good results. But look at the coins here. This prompt was also supposed to have, um, pennies and nickels, US based, and very specific in the prompt for that. And that's not what you're getting. So you're going to struggle. And then putting the characters that have been created into the environment. Again, tweaking needs to be done in terms of the beach and the sand and stuff like that. But you start to upload, and this is where Runway really comes into play. You start to upload references in terms of what the location is, who your characters are, and you can start to put them into those places. You'll notice that the pirate sidekick doesn't have a monocle or any kind of eye patch or anything like that. And that's because, and I'll show you in a minute, that as you start to do some other things, you start to get some really weird hallucinations and problems happening. Um, yeah. Uh, yeah. So let's go to the next thing here. Now, this is a variation of that. And I'm finding the character consistency relatively good if you feed it good character references, though it's not like right here I changed what the reference was. And this is another example where I started getting a variation on the pirate captain that wasn't necessarily what I was trying to get. I also prompted in almost every one of these situations that I wanted pennies and nickels to be the coins that were in these chests. And I basically had very little luck getting it to that point, which is making it and will make it difficult when we start to get into the close ups of the coins being held up and stuff like that. This is supposed to be Pirate Sidekick holding up a penny and a nickel. Do they look like a penny and a nickel? They don't to me. unless they come from some, Earth 2, and who knows? Um, the pirate captain's lack of an upper lip makes me think of Matthew Modine. Well, it's a Matthew Modine pirate captain. You know, what are you gonna do? So then we get into video, and this is where you need to tell me if you can hear things. What I did here is I had to try a couple of different things to get what I needed. And even getting Runway to do relatively believable in an animation style, um, voiceover or lip sync was very difficult. So I went into using a solution called Hedra, Hedra, which seemed to be, from my test, the best version without going into like VO3 and spending a gazillion dollars on those um, generations. So let's see if you can hear this and watch this.
Ahoy, mateys! I be Captain Tanner, and today we be helping me old friend Pirate Shapey with a mighty big job, sorting treasure.
So let me know if you heard that, because I'd be interested to hear if you could not only see it, I'm pretty confident you could see it, but you should be hearing the audio. And if you're seeing weird things happen in the frame, you're not having a hallucination, and you're hearing it. So there you go. So fed this in, and I wouldn't put particular attention on the eye patches in some of these. Oh, it's loud. It's not that loud on my end. So let me turn it down a little and we'll see how this goes. And if I go to the next one, we'll see if it resets. It seems to reset the volume. Okay, so this is just a different voice that was generated. Let me just I'm trying to look at this. My screen over here that I'm looking at is pretty far away here. So I'll take the volume down a little bit. Let's see how it goes. Here we go, I think.
Ahoy, mateys! I be Captain Tanner, and today we be helping me old friend Pirate Shapey with a mighty big job, sorting treasure.
Hopefully that volume's a little better. Let's go over here and we'll play this one. Yeah, so I'll keep it down a little. Let's see.
Ahoy, mateys! I be Captain Tanner, and today we be helping me old friend Pirate Shapey with a mighty big job, sorting treasure.
So that's just a variation on the audio. That's what we're really getting there. Let's go ahead and go here, and and the big difference, by the way, between these clips, the first two, were the first one and the second one, I basically upres to 4K, so that's the only difference there. And then we just have a different voice. Let me see if this one's any different. Probably loud.
Ahoy, mateys!
Yeah, that's just the 4K version. So I just basically brought that in. Runway will let you take what's in Runway and it'll let you up-res it to 4K. Unfortunately, Hedra does not. So it generates a 720p version of what you feed into it. And then you have to basically use some sort of external tool. Unfortunately, a lot of these models don't let you just import a video and say upscale to 4K. It has a problem with that. So if I'm in Runway generating video, I can get a video that's been generated and say, now I want you to basically upscale it to 4K, but I can't just import an asset and say upscale to 4K. So that you have to use, Topaz. There are pretty good scalers now in some of the NLEs that will let you do that, so on and so forth. So you get the basic idea. And then what I did is I went into Hedra and I did a couple of tests on that. Let me just see if this is it. I think this is the Runway version of lip syncing first. So let's just see if that works.
Ahoy, mateys! I be Captain Tanner, and today we be helping me old friend Pirate Shapey with a mighty big job.
So in this case, I just fed a still image into Runway, and what's nice is it has face recognition, so it automatically detected the pirate captain. It automatically detected the pirate sidekick. And then I got to choose which one was going to say the lines that I fed. I just uploaded an MP3 file for this particular one. But when you watch it, you notice that the frame has nothing else going on.
Sort and treasure.
It's strictly just
Ahoy, mateys! I be Captain Tanner.
a still image with the mouth moving. That's all that's happening here. Now, I fed the same image into Hedra, Hedra, and what we're going to see is the result from that. You can look for any hallucinations and things, but I just tried to prompt it to specify that I wanted the pirate captain on the left-hand side. But sometimes what will happen is when you're feeding this into something like Hedra, it will start to do some weird things with other characters that are in the frame. I think Hedra has some really great stuff, but has a lot of things that it needs to work out. Where you'll start to see the other character mouthing things and stuff like that. So that becomes kind of frustrating. So again, let me bring the volume down a little bit. And we can see that the big difference here is that with Hedra, when I feed this audio into there and I specify it, that it's going to animate the whole scene. So let's go ahead and do that.
Ahoy, mateys! I be Captain Tanner. And today, we be helping me old friend Pirate Shapey with a mighty big job. Sortin' treasure.
One more time so you can look at the whole frame again.
Ahoy, mateys! I be Captain Tanner.
Look at the
and
pirate
today,
sidekick.
We be helping me old friend Pirate Shapey with a mighty big job. Sortin' treasure.
And that might be one of the better ones. It is one of the better ones. There were times where I fed that into Hedra with early prompts, and it would take the pirate sidekick next to the treasure chest, and that character would essentially be mouthing a similar type of dialogue to the pirate captain. So there you go. And this might just be the 4K version.
Ahoy, mateys! I be Captain Tanner. And today, we be helping me old friend Pirate Shapey with a mighty big job. Sortin' treasure.
So the only real difference there is I ran it through Topaz to increase the quality of the image overall. And then let's just see what else I've loaded in here. I think these are just a couple of other little examples of some motion. Let me just see what else I got. Yeah, it's just a motion clip. So it has some ambient sound. Just fed it into, I believe, Runway to just get something that could have a little bit more visual interest. And then I've started to do other things like close-ups and it's not a long script. It's only a 2-page script, but I need to know if I'm going in the right direction with this test with my client in terms of character development, location, things like that. So that's what I'm waiting for right now, is to sort of figure out whether or not we are going in the right direction. So it's kind of like a little bit of a sneak peek into what I've been doing. I'm going balder because of it. I'm going grayer because of it. And there is a lot of frustration, but there are magical moments where you start to figure out if you approach something a certain way, that it's not ever will be a paint by numbers, but you find a workflow. And for me, that workflow is pretty much the idea that you're going to, start with an outline or a script. You're going to start to create and generate characters and environments, and then you're going to start to create the video components of this. Let me just quickly give you a little insight into something called Weavy.ai. And this one I find to be extremely interesting. I don't know what it is, but right now in the Gen AI space, so many of these companies in this space are either based in Israel or are Israeli engineers and people creating these solutions. I haven't quite figured that out, but I'm running into that a lot, and Weavy is no exception. What's really interesting about Weavy is it's node based. And so that means that you can go in here and, I was messing around again today with something, and you can create node-based trees based on how you want to iterate when it comes to a particular project. So I have a prompt here, and I'm actually feeding it into 4 different Gen AI models. And what's so cool about Weavy, and I have so much to learn, is it has lots of tools that we might think we would need, or we would think, or we will need when it comes to adding nodes or things to our pipeline. So there's levels, a compositor, painter node, resize node, invert node. Um, you get into image models, and they want to support every model that's out there. So these are all image based models that you can actually use. These are video models that you can use. If I wanted to, this let me just tell you what this prompt is, just so you can see it. It's 80s style wrestlers in a WWF um, WrestleMania style cage match at an arena similar to Madison Square Garden. Scene should feel like it takes place in the 1980s and should include the wrestlers, referee, announcers, and attendees. Should feel gritty like the movie The Wrestler, right? So we're getting different. Um, I'm going to turn me off here. We're getting different results depending on different image models. What's really interesting is our main wrestler character. If you go do a Google search for WrestleMania in Madison Square Garden in the 80s, looks very similar to this wrestler right here. So obviously that's part of the scraping and data mining in terms of where this is coming from. But once you have let's say, a model that you like, let's say this is an image that I like, what I can do is I can now go over here and I can say, oh, I want to use one of these video models. And what's really brilliant about this is that with Weavy, even though very much like the other solutions that are out there, you are paying for a monthly or yearly subscription with X number of credits. With Weavy, if you can get your head around this, and I'm just starting to, it tells you exactly how many credits you are using for each generation that you use, right? So you can see here that VO3 text to video, 320 credits. And I believe that's for 1 second. This is Moon Valley, image to video, 320. Now we go down to Runway and you see 30 credits, or Cling and you see 25 credits. So a lot of these other models are much more cost effective, but they don't necessarily give you all of the things that you would get from those different models. So I have a little bit in terms of credit here. I have 111 credits left from sort of the test. I'm this close to subscribing at least for a month to Weavy, because I'd really like to dig into this, and I love this node-based workflow because it's so visual and you can see where everything's coming from. But let's just take a relatively cost-effective um, model here and see what happens. I don't know. Maybe I'd try Cling 2.1, drag that into my node tree. And then what I'm going to do is zoom into that, and you'll see that it says prompt. And I will feed, I'm going to put this in as the image. And then I guess technically I could run the model and see what happens with it, and it would just do what it's going to do. But why don't I run that prompt into here as well and see what we get, because I'm just learning how to use this. So I've got the same prompt in here, but now I'm using an image reference from one of those models. And I'll say run model, and it's going to cost me, 25 credits to do that. And I have no idea what it's going to create here. I mean, I think I have a somewhat of an idea, but I've never done this, and we're doing this in real time in terms of this workflow with this model. Um, but I kind of feel like Weavy is not that everybody's going to love a node-based workflow overall for what they're doing, but I kind of feel like here, I'll switch this out while it's generating. I kind of feel like Weavy is on the right track. They're thinking the way people in production and post think, and they are trying to create a workflow that supports all of the models. That's their goal. Every model that's out there, image based, video based, and allow you to come up with a workflow that thinks like you. So you have to get into the node based or node tree based kind of mentality, but then you see everything that you are creating in your building. So that workflow is there. Let me switch it back over to the model itself that was just generated. And then you just create basically an export node that lets you export this stuff. And let's just see if it's actually playing. Oh, they're mad. Oh, definitely some hallucinations there. Um, Especially when we get into here. So you can see with this wrestler, and the wrestlers look remarkably the same when it comes to their look and feel. So there's issues here, but let's just for giggles come out of here and let's do the same thing, and let's choose we'll choose runway Gen 4, and we'll choose Sea Dance over here. So I'm going to put 2 more nodes in here. These are both video, so base nodes. And I guess this will allow me to do first frame into here. And I will put that same, no, I don't want that prompt. I got to go over here. Sorry, kids. I prompt that. And I'm going to do the same thing to my other model here. And I'm also going to feed that same image into, sorry. And by the way, when you click on these, you also get the parameters, right? So you can go in and choose what the resolution is, things like that. So they're letting you tap into what that particular model allows you to do. And I think we're okay. I'm going to run that one, and I'm going to run that one, and we're going to let those run in the background until we see an image. And once this is done, I think we're pretty much done with the live stream today. Questions, things that you want to talk about, comment on, things that you're seeing. That's what I want to do right now. So what is it that we want to discuss or go over and talk about right now, in terms of what it is that you're noticing? Anybody have any comments for me on this? I'd love to hear that. And I just realized, because I moved my Chrome window around, that made things a little funky over there, but that should be cleaned up now again. What do we got? Before I head out of here, we take a look at these 2 different generations in 2 other models. And is this making sense to everybody? I'm not saying you're diving in the same way I am, and some of you may have a lot of experience here, some of you may not. But does this make sense, and is it helping you have a clearer picture of what this stuff is? Marshall says, my concerns and skepticism lies in the fact that I'm not convinced that the public is going to ultimately accept and tolerate widespread use of audiovisual Gen AI. I totally understand that, Marshall. I feel that we're not going to have any choice. And we are not that far along from now from being completely convinced. I don't even think it's going to be a matter of tolerating. I mean, of course, we want things to label that something is Gen AI, and even Google of all companies is making us as content creators tag things whether or not it was Gen AI created. And there will be digital watermarks and other things that get integrated into what we're doing. There will hopefully be better paper trails in terms of where things come from, and a confidence that's created in us in terms of when we do use these tools, that we understand, you know, and from a client's perspective, they understand that they can have some peace of mind. How it all plays out, I don't know. But we're just going to see more and more of this stuff. And I'm not talking about, Bigfoot and the talking babies. That stuff is funny and can be interesting to see. But yeah, something has occurred here. Let me just zoom in. It looks like one of these models has created something. I don't know what's happening with CDance. It failed to download the file. Please check the URL is accessible in Drive. Oh, so maybe there's something that's broken there. Let's take a look at this is Runway's version of that same exact prompt and that same exact image being fed into it. So I'll go full screen without without my ugly face in it, and we'll take a look at it. Okay. So did we just have somebody disappear at the end? I'm just looking. Yes, we did. So again, that's a hallucination, pretty big one because that's not a little dude. But we start to see some of those things, and and there's no excuse. I mean, this is just the reality of what's happening. But what people will do oftentimes is if they're doing a 5 second, 8 second, 10 second clip, then what they'll do is they'll get a relatively good generation from what they're creating, but they'll trim it and they'll say, okay, well, I've got a hallucination that comes in here. I can use the first 3 or 4 seconds of this, or they might take that and reiterate to get something that's more specific to or doesn't contain those things. And each model allows you to specify. There's also things called negative prompts that don't exist in all of the Gen AI tools out there, where you can very specifically say, I don't want to see these things. And if you try that with models that don't have that feature, results really vary, because sometimes I'll prompt that I don't want to see any talking. I basically just want to see a visual shot with motion, and you see the characters mouthing words. It's sort of like the model can't help itself from its data mining to say, I'm going to do this. I know you're telling me not to, but I don't totally get it. And now mouths are moving. Make sense? I hope so. All right. That's what I got for you right now. I'm going to jump into this more. Hopefully, I'm going to hear from my client soon in terms of whether or not the direction that I'm taking with these particular characters and stuff are in the right direction. Some things to fix with that beach, of course, and I've got to figure out how to make those coins consistent without all of those hallucinations and problems that can occur. I hope this has been worth some of your time to get you at least thinking about how you might dive into this or stuff like that. This is, we're in it right now. We are officially in the Wild West. The closest to something that I've seen so far that kind of gets me excited about this is Weavy.ai. And that said, the problem is sort of that it's node based, which is great, and also at the same time can get really cluttered. And I've got to figure out whether or not that particular platform or tool is going to allow me to get to the finish line in one place, or is it still going to be I'm diving into 3, 4, 5 different solutions, which I think is going to be the case, even though I didn't want it to be for some time. Okay, that's what I got. I appreciate everybody coming to the live stream and spending some time. As always, you can reach out to me at contact@thec47.com or head over to thec47.com, the website, and then just go over to the contact form and reach out if you have questions. Yeah, there you go. It's getting crazy out there. Go create some stuff, and don't forget that cameras still work, lights still work, audio still works, and that's not going away either. It's gonna change, evolve. They're still just tools to help us tell stories. All right, I'm out of here. Have a good rest of the week, and hope to do another live stream in the near future, and maybe even more hyper focused on a particular workflow related to this stuff. Take care. Bye.